Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. Today is Tuesday, the 11th of August? The 12th of August. Always a day late or a day earlier, whatever. Anyway, good to have you with me tonight. Thanks for being here on Courtroom Insider. Would love to know where you are watching from and if you have any questions tonight. Two really interesting guests that I'm looking forward to the conversation. First up, we have Bill Thompson. He's the prosecutor in Latah County who has been known around the world over the past few weeks for setting up, agreeing to the plea agreement, setting up a plea agreement for Brian Kohberger. Going to talk with him here. And then Scott Rouse, who is a behavior body language expert. Fascinating conversation. Many of you actually sent me his video after I interviewed Lori Vallow Daybell. You sent me the video saying, have you seen this? I had not. I had heard about Scott. He's on the behavior panel, which is a group of body language experts, behavioral analysis people who came together during COVID and started releasing videos every week on YouTube, and it got huge. And then they started to go to CrimeCon, and now Scott's here with me tonight. So we're going to talk about both of those, or we're going to talk with both of those guys. I want to jump right into it. Bill Thompson, you know, the guy with the long white beard that everybody came to know during the prosecution of Brian Kohberger. He has been a prosecutor since 1992. He has been the Latah County prosecutor. That is a long time. He has served on the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association Board of Directors. He was the president of that board. He served on the Idaho Juvenile Justice Commission since 2002. He's been awarded the Idaho Association of Counties H. Sidney Duncombe Award. He was elected to the Idaho Association of Counties. In 2017, the Idaho State Bar gave him their Professionalism Award. He has done criminal prosecutions, civil legal functions for the county. He has done all sorts of cases over the years, obviously. And I believe, from what I was told, he's the only prosecutor in Idaho to get a murder conviction without a body. He has years and years of experience. And, you know, he was willing to do an interview with me to, in his words, answer some of the questions you all have had about why did they do the plea agreement, which seemed controversial. Some of the families did not want a plea agreement. They wanted Brian Kohberger to go all the way to trial. Others are just fine with the plea agreement. They're happy that it happened and that it's done, that the case isn't going to trial. If you think about it, right now we would be right in the midst of jury selection, and the trial would be beginning in the next few weeks, in the next few days. So that's not happening. Instead, Brian Kohberger is going away for life in prison. I had a chance to ask Bill about all of these topics. You'll have to forgive my attire and my location. I was in Utah when he got back to me and said he could talk with me. And so I did the interview from my parents' guest bedroom, not a fancy studio like this. So here is my conversation with Bill Thompson. So looking at my calendar, Mr. Thompson, it's interesting that you'd be right in the middle of jury selection had this trial gone forward. What are you doing now this summer? The fact that your calendar kind of opened up.
Well, we still have plenty to do. As you might recall, Judge Hippler is having us address all the different filings with the court that were sealed. There are 240 some odd filings over the past 2.5 years. Most of them were sealed to protect the jury pool. And now that the case is resolved, we're expecting that most of those filings can be unsealed. But what the court is having us do, he's giving us chunks of like 40 documents at a time to review and let him know whether there's anything that needs to be redacted or protected before they get unsealed and released. So that's consuming plenty of time right now.
How long do you expect that process to last?
I would guess it probably at least a month or so. 40 at a time for 240, probably a couple months.
Wow.
He's given us 14 days on each batch, and he's going backwards. He's starting with the most current sealed documents because those are the ones he's most familiar with. If you recall, the case was originally with Judge John Judge up here in Latah County. So everything that was sealed prior to the case being transferred last fall to Ada County, Judge Hippler is going to have to re-educate himself on what those filings were about so he can make a good decision on whether there's something that needs to be protected.
There also is the police records, which seem to be coming out bit by bit, you know, different media outlets requesting those. Any idea of how much more evidence is out there that the public hasn't yet seen?
Well, when we're talking about how much evidence is out there, as far as evidence that's actually relevant to the charges that would have been brought out at trial, that's probably much smaller than the totality of all the information that was gathered by the investigators, because we have literally gigabytes of data, security videos from around town, from the University of Idaho, for example, that in the end didn't have anything of relevance, but they were gathered early on in the investigation because the investigators were looking for any possible leads to pursue. As far as the police reports, photographs, crime scene photographs, and other evidence like that, the Moscow Police Department and the Idaho State Police are the ones that are the custodians of those records. And so that's why you're seeing the city of Moscow trying to be proactive with getting reports available to the public. And I think they're working on other materials, videos, and photographs to try to get those ready for the public. And I understand the state police are doing something similar. So as quickly as they can act, it'll be unfolding for the public with, of course, review and appropriate redactions.
Having reviewed all of that, what in your eyes is the most disturbing thing that you've seen with this case?
Well, certainly the crime scene itself was very disturbing. The photographs are very graphic. My personal preference is I don't think that many of them should be just generally given out to the public. I think that certainly the public has the right to know, but the families also have some privacy interests. And I think that that needs to be balanced. In the end, it's not our office's call. It's going to be the attorneys for the city of Moscow and for the state police as far as how much they believe is appropriate to redact. And again, balance. We want the public to know as much as possible, but we don't want this to become unnecessarily or avoidably painful for the families to have to see what occurred to their loved ones. It's very, very sad. It's going to be very difficult, I'm afraid.
I know Judge Boyce in the Daybell case permanently sealed the autopsy photos and some of the crime scene photos. I guess that could be an option here if Judge Hippler decides to keep some of those items sealed forever.
Well, I'm not sure that Judge Hippler has the jurisdiction on that now because the
Is it
criminal case
right? Yeah.
is pretty much precluded or concluded. We're operating under Idaho's public records laws, and there is a specific exception or exemption for unwarranted invasions of personal privacy. There's a definition for that, but it requires a balancing of the public interest and the privacy interests. And that's what I know the city of Moscow and the attorneys for the state police are working through. Again, my perspective as the prosecutor is to want to protect the families as much as possible. And I don't see a necessity for saturating the public social media with gruesome photographs of these poor victims, but it's not my call to make.
Right. I want to talk about the plea agreement that, of course, there has been some heat and some criticism against you in your office. Do you think that that whole process could have been handled differently or better as far as coordinating with the families?
You know, I think the plea process happened as well as it could given the circumstances. And just to give you background, the state, we were never looking for a plea in this case. The defense had maintained all along that their client was factually innocent. So for months now, we've just been preparing for trial. We were in the process of doing that. We came up into, I'm looking at the calendar, June 18th, we were in Boise for hearings on the defense's motion to continue the trial and also a motion they filed asking for permission to offer alternative perpetrator evidence. It was pretty clear at the conclusion of that hearing that Judge Hippler was not going to grant either of those motions. Again, Ashley Jennings, my senior deputy, and I just came back to Moscow and we're continuing to prepare for trial when the defense reached out to us that following week and asked if we were able to make an offer or were interested in making an offer. And we responded initially by saying, well, what is it that your client wants to do or is willing to do? And then the next thing we did is we scheduled meetings with all the families. And that Thursday and Friday, that'd be the 26th, 27th, we met with representatives of all four of the homicide victims' families to update them on the case. And we asked them, we said, we've been approached by the defense about a possible plea and we'd like to have your thoughts. And the result of those meetings is, I think, as to be expected. There were some family members who felt strongly that they wanted the death penalty pursued no matter what. And then there were a number of other families and family members who said equally strongly that they wanted to have closure. They did not want the trauma of the trial. They wanted to be able to heal and move on. So we took all that information, all those responses with our attorney team, and over the weekend discussed it. And we responded to the defense by saying, essentially, if the defendant wants to avoid trial, there's only one possibility. He pleads guilty straight up to everything, understanding that he's going to be facing fixed life sentences, and we will require him to waive appeal. And that's the only resolution short of trial that's out there. And by Monday morning, we were advised by the defense, they advised us in the court, the defendant was prepared to plead guilty on those terms. And so the judge set it as quickly as he could for a change of plea, because the court staff were already in the process of bringing in, I believe, 10,000 prospective jurors to start jury selection. And the judge, rightfully so, knew that he needed to move quickly. We needed to move quickly to get the plea on the record if that's in fact what was going to happen. So I think in hindsight, the process was as good as it could get. I know that some folks would have liked more time to think about it and to talk about it. And I respect the opinions of the family members who don't agree with this resolution. I understand that. Just the same as we respect the opinions of the family members who support this resolution. In the end, it was our decision, ultimately my decision as the elected prosecutor, and with the input and concurrence of our attorney team, we decided to make the offer for the resolution, and we believe that's the appropriate resolution.
Is there a way that you can meet with those families and go through your case with them now? Like, this is who we would have called, this is the evidence they would have said, just to maybe get some of those answers for them?
Yes, and we've offered that. And the Monday before the sentencing, one of the families met via Teams with the two lead investigators. And Ashley Jennings, my senior deputy, and Josh Hurwitz, who's our special deputy prosecutor. And they spent a lengthy time that afternoon. I wasn't able to attend, answering questions for the family, letting the investigators share information that we couldn't make public before to try to answer some of those questions. And we're offering the same opportunity to any of the other families if they would like to talk, and we're going to leave it up to them as to if and when they want to have that conversation.
Could you have required him to allocute, to talk about, talk more? I mean, he didn't say anything, meaning Brian Kohberger.
You know, we thought about what sort of allocution would be required for the plea. Idaho law doesn't require a detailed factual allocution, and in fact, the court doesn't have the authority to compel that. Our feeling on this, and Judge Hippler talked about this too at the time of sentencing, is in this particular case, there would be no way to corroborate or to validate anything the defendant might say. In fact, early on in this investigation, we had members of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, which are their profilers. They were here helping us with the investigation, and they even told us back then, back in November of 2022, early December of 2022, that in all likelihood, whoever was responsible for these murders, the reason that the murderer did what he did would never be known, or if the person tried to say something, it wouldn't make sense to regular people, ordinary people, and likely be even more victimizing. So we elected to not try to pursue anything further than making sure we had a sustainable, factual guilty plea where, as he did under oath, he acknowledged that the charges against him were factually true. It wasn't one of these cases where There was an Alford plea, which is where a person pleads guilty, saying that they acknowledge that the evidence is enough to convict him. Here, he acknowledged that he was guilty. And we felt that was the best thing to do in this particular case.
Bill, could you, well, let me rephrase that. Why do you think he took the plea? Why do you think he changed his mind and in the matter of days it went from we're going to trial for 3 months to I'm guilty?
Yeah, Nate, I don't know the answer to that. I think the reasons behind um, why the defendant did what he did as far as pleading guilty are really known only to him and his attorneys. And I don't know if they would be able to talk to you about that, but that's where I would ask.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Dylan Mortensen and her victim impact statement. Tell me, I learned that she did not want to look at Brian at Kohberger.
Correct. She did not want to look at the defendant, and she did not want him to look at her. And she asked first if she could give her statement seated at the table, the counsel table, as opposed to standing at the podium. And Judge Hippler very graciously said, certainly yes. And then she asked me, because I was sitting on her left, if I would block the view between her and the defendant while she was giving her statement. So that's what occurred in court, and people might have wondered why I was kind of sitting at a little weird angle, looking just straight at Dylan, and that was because she wanted to have some physical protection and asked us to do that for her.
I can't imagine the preparation that went into helping her prepare for that statement. Well, originally to help her prepare to testify. What type of things did you all do to help not only her, but the other victims prepare to go into that courtroom and give their statement?
Well, we did a number of things, and fortunately, both of the surviving roommates have really strong family support and personal support through family and friends and other resources. And so we largely let them have their peace and have their time. We consciously made the decision not to start specific trial preparation discussions with them too early. In fact, we were planning on doing that about this time while we were still doing jury selection, so they weren't, so that the trauma wasn't raised and they had sustained living with that any longer than necessary in anticipation of going to trial. Of course, we had a grand jury. And although I can't talk about what actually happened to the grand jury, you can imagine that a grand jury would be an opportunity for potential witnesses to be meeting with us meeting with them. But the families really did this on their own, and we said, we're here for whatever you want, whatever we can do. Just let us know. We want you to have your space. We want you to be healed and as strong as possible. It's tough for him. It's been tough for him.
Right. Did you know what each of them was going to say?
No, no. We were, well, actually, no, I take that back. We were aware of Bethany's statement because Bethany wrote out her statement and had one of her college friends, Emily, read that. So yes, we did have that in advance, but we did not know what Dylan was going to say, nor did we know what most of the other victims or family members were going to say. It was pretty fresh to us hearing it in court as it was for everybody else in the courtroom.
And what was your reaction hearing some of those? I mean, you got emotional at points when you were speaking, but there were some of those statements were very emotional and very raw.
They were very emotional. They were very honest. The strength that that not only Dylan and Bethany showed, but the family members who were suffering this, horrible, unimaginable loss. The strength that they showed. You had the whole variety of reactions, just as we expect. People are going to grieve differently. Some grieve with anger, some grieve with self-reflection. And we saw all of that in the courtroom on July 2nd. On July 23rd. I believe it was on July 2nd. So on July 23rd, we saw all that range of emotions. It was powerful. And if you were watching, you saw that even the court teared up, and I think there were probably times during that sentencing hearing where there wasn't a dry eye in the entire courtroom from not only family members but law enforcement who were there to watch. The Attorney General was there. The court security staff. This impacted everybody.
The whole world. Can I ask you a procedural question, Bill?
Sure.
I've covered other sentencings where the victims are not allowed to address the defendant. They have to address the court. And in fact, in the Daybell sentencings, the court, I believe, had to pre-approve some of it. They couldn't say certain things. Was that different here because this was a plea agreement and he had already pleaded guilty, or just a different judge deciding to be a little bit more flexible? Any idea?
Nate, it's a little bit of both. In a death penalty case, during the punishment phase of the trial, victims are allowed to make impact statements, but Idaho law specifically prevents them from giving opinions about the defendant or for advocating for a specific sentence. You know, the impact statements in the penalty phase of a death penalty case are restricted just to the impact of the losses on that particular family member or on the family. That doesn't apply in other types of sentencings in criminal court. And so it really is left up to the judge's discretion. And I've been in front of judges who have made it clear up front that he or she wants the victim impact statements directed at the court, not at the defendant. But in this case, Judge Hippler allowed some of the family members who wanted to address the defendant directly. I think that in this case, that was appropriate. I think that was important for those family members to have that opportunity to make it known clearly to the defendant what they think of him and what he had done, what the impact had on them from his killing their loved ones.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about this case?
Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer to that. I'll be candid, Nate. I have not consciously followed a lot of the media, particularly social media stuff. I mean, I read the newspaper, I listen to the local radio station, and that's about it. And so I consciously didn't want to get myself distracted with whatever was going on out there in the world. I had enough people come in and talk to me about, well, there's this rumor and there's that rumor. And, you know, I knew in my own mind that so much of that was just made up. It was speculation. It was people grandstanding for some folks. So, yeah, I don't know from the public's perspective, what would have been the most significant portion or troubling or compelling portion of this case. I guess I'd have to say in the end, it's the loss of those 4 lives for no reason and in such a brutal fashion. I mean, at the beginning and at the end, that's what this is about, is Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana, and certainly also Dylan and Bethany, who fortunately were not killed. Like I said in court, I mean, they had angels watching over them that early morning. That's the only explanation I have for why we didn't have even more tragedy in the form of more murders.
Do you believe confidently 100% that Kohberger acted alone?
We don't have any evidence to indicate that there was another person involved, and the investigators looked. That said, I guess there's always a possibility that there's something out there that is unknown to the investigators and to us, but there has been nothing that the investigators found to suggest that was actually the case, that somebody in addition to Mr. Kohberger was involved. The recreations that the investigators did using the amount of time that we know he was in the house based on the audio from the next door neighbor's surveillance camera, and our consultation with our crime scene experts is there was more than enough time for him to do what he did by himself. Dylan didn't indicate that there was any more than one person there. There's just nothing to suggest that there was truly anybody other than the defendant.
And do you believe that it was just the one knife?
I believe that the K-bar knife was the weapon used to kill. I also think it is possible that he had another weapon of some type. I don't know if it was a blunt force weapon or something. I think that it is likely that he had more than one weapon with him, but we don't know what that actually would have been.
And do you believe that had he not left the sheath behind, would you have been able to capture him?
You know, we've had this conversation with the investigators on more than a handful of occasions. You know, the question of whether this case could have been solved without the sheath. And I'm relying on the investigators when they say, yes, we think eventually we would have found him, but it may have taken a very long time. Certainly, from a prosecutor's point of view, the DNA on the sheath was compelling evidence to support this case. In fact, we did not file charges until we had the preliminary parental DNA match. If you'll remember, before he was arrested, before he was charged, the FBI did what's called a trash pull at his parents' residence in Pennsylvania, where they seized the garbage that had been set out from the house for collection and shipped the bags of garbage to the Idaho State Forensic Lab. And the forensic people found a cotton swab that looked like somebody used to clean their ears, and they recovered DNA from that swab that came back conclusive as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was on the sheath. And at that point, we knew we had the right person. And then after he was arrested, we obtained a DNA sample directly from him after he was transported back here to Moscow. And then the lab conclusively matched that to the DNA on the sheath. Powerful evidence. Hard to explain that one away.
Right. And really, yeah, I mean, that's like a movie script in a way. I don't want to make light of it, but connecting all those dots and finding him there. And there are people who are concerned that Brian Kohberger might do some exclusive interview and make $1 million or write a book or produce a movie. What can you say about that? Are inmates allowed here in Idaho to do that?
Now, I don't know that there's a prohibition on an inmate talking to an author or the media or whatever the case may be, but Idaho does have a specific statute that says if a murderer receives any remuneration, anything of value for talking or for giving their story or sharing their story, that's impounded by the state treasurer and held to be available to the families of the victims for their losses. So there's a specific statute in Idaho that would intercept anything like that and save it for the victims' families.
Could his family, though? I mean, like, could someone make an agreement maybe with his parents where Kohberger then speaks, but the money's funneled another way?
I suppose that's possible, and I don't know what the best way to deal with that would be. The criminal system doesn't have direct means of addressing that. I think certainly if any of the families want to pursue him civilly, there's much more authority for a civil court to locate assets that might be hidden in the hands of third parties and that sort of thing. So that's an option that the law makes available to any of the families who are interested, but it's beyond the scope of what we can do with a criminal case.
Right. Have you spoken with Kohberger's family?
I have met his mother and father briefly, but no substantive conversation with them.
And would you want to speak to Brian Kohberger himself?
You know, I don't think so. If he wants to talk to somebody, we have some good investigators that he's welcome to talk to. I don't feel like I have any desire to interact with the defendant at all.
Yeah. Mr. Thompson, thank you very much. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, I appreciate you taking the time and waiting for me while I tried to figure out copy and paste the link for the Zoom meeting. That's not my strong suit, but I do appreciate your time, and I appreciate the opportunity for you to be able to tell people, hey, this is the real scoop. This is what's really going on here. And maybe debunk some of the rumors and gossip and stuff that distract folks. So thank
Well,
you for your help.
and again, my thanks to Bill for chatting with me. That's the first time we had actually spoken, and so I appreciate his time. And I know many of you probably have questions for him. He's getting a lot of questions, but as he said, he's tuned out the media coverage and has mainly been focused and is now moving forward on all of those documents to decide or to recommend to the judge which ones should be released and which ones should be sealed. Now let's get to my interview with Scott Rouse. He's a well-known behavior analyst, body language expert, and consultant who trains elite forces in the U.S. military. He advises law enforcement and Fortune 500 companies. He's also a Grammy-nominated producer, a TEDx speaker, and a best-selling author. He's recognized for his expertise in nonverbal communication, deception detection, and helping individuals and organizations improve their communications skills. He has his own channel and his own website, scottrouse.com. He's also on the behavior panel, and he's coming to CrimeCon. He's been there before. He'll be back this year in a few weeks in Denver. I first got to know of Scott, well, I'd heard of him, but really got to understand what he does when he analyzed my interview with Lori Daybell a few weeks ago. And many of you sent me the link, and so I watched it, and I said, hey, I want to interview this guy. And I asked him about that interview with Lori, also Kohberger, his analysis of Brian Kohberger's behavior, and tips for you and I when we meet people to not be deceived, things to pay attention to. Here's my interview with Scott. Let's start off, Scott. Would you mind just kind of describing to me, telling me your background?
I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I mostly do training and interrogating. So I train law enforcement and the military in interrogation and body language. And then if there are, let's say, a lot of things I do are for embezzlers. If somebody's stolen a bunch of money from a bank or something, then I'll go talk to the person or people they think that have taken that. So that's for the most part what I do. But it's a whole lot of training.
So what got you interested in that?
When I was a little kid, my father was a doctor, and he would tell me what somebody was when they would come to the hospital, because I'd go hang out with them for lunch and things like that. And he'd tell me I'd say, what's wrong with that guy? And he'd say, well, his leg hurts, because he was limping. I said, oh, okay. Because, I was 6 or 7. And then I'd say, well, what's wrong with that guy? So he's probably got an infection because he was coughing a lot. So he'd tell me all these things that just fascinated me. And one time we saw, my whole family, my mom would come and get my brother and sister and I we lived in Louisa, Kentucky, tiny little town. And she'd come next door and get us, because we lived next to the school, and walk us down to the hospital, which was 3 blocks away because the town was really small. My dad was the only doctor. And the only time we got to see him was for lunch sometimes, maybe once a week. So we'd go down there and have lunch with him. And then when we were having lunch and we were in his office, which was like a big closet, because this hospital was just 2 houses stuck together, with a little thing between them. Well, I saw a couple of friends of mine sitting in the waiting room, and it was Billy Elkins and Robert Bellamy. That's who it was. And I remember saying, what's wrong with these guys? And however you say it as a kid, I know those guys, what's wrong with them? And he said, well, let's take a look. And so he looked over and he said, well, Billy is pretending he's got an earache, but he's not sick. So he wanted to skip school. And he goes, Robert really is sick. So he's here for me to check his ear out, and he's got an earache, so we'll get that taken care of.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, well, let's look at Billy's mother. I said, oh, because we knew her. And I said, okay. He said, see how she doesn't look like she usually looks. Usually her hair is done. She has on makeup and all that. And I said, yeah. He said, she doesn't have that. That tells me she's been up all night. She's worried about Billy. I said, oh. And he said, see how his hand's on his ear? I said, yeah. He said, that tells me his ear hurts. And he was leaning on his mom. And I said, well, what about Robert? How do you know that he's not sick? And he said, well, look at him. And he was sitting on this little bench. He said, see how his legs are dangling like that? And I said, yeah. He said, see how he's looking at that little magazine? I can't remember the name of the magazine. It was one of those magazines
Like
kids
Boy's
read
Life
all the
or
time.
something.
Yeah, one of those, with
Yeah.
pictures and stuff in it. And he said, now what's going to happen is this. He said, in just a minute, his mother's going to lean over and say something to him. She's going to pat him. And then his face is going to change. He's going to make a sad face. He's going to look at her from the side and tell her something. And then she'll pat him again. Then he'll go back to reading look at that little magazine. And then his happy face will come back, his normal face. And I said, okay. And within like a minute, I think, if I remember correctly, That's what happened. Everything he said would happen just happened. And it fascinated me from that day forward what someone was going to do next. So I just focused on that all the time. And he would bring home studies and things he'd find out about body language. Before they called it body language. And he would tell me things about behavior and how you could tell when something's going to happen. So that's where my fascination with it started. Was
And
there.
Scott, you've worked on. Give us an example of some of the cases you've worked on over the years.
It wouldn't be anything that anybody would know. It's not.
But like the
It's
type of crimes, the type of. I mean, have you done like murder cases and robberies,
man.
things like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 My favorites though are as horrible as this sounds because homicide and robberies are the most famous. But for me, it's dealing with playing the chess game of someone who's embezzling. I love that. I absolutely love it. And those are crimes. It's true crime, but it's not very exciting as far as that goes. But it's that mental game you play with people. But I still deal with people who are stealing from a Walgreens or something like that, or somebody that works at the Walgreens is stealing money out of the cash register, those kind of things. Most of it's not very exciting.
Now, I first heard about the behavior panel with CrimeCon a few years ago, and now
Mhm.
you have your own channel as well. And a few weeks ago, when I interviewed Lori Daybell, I had so many people send me your video, and I was able to watch it. And tell me how the YouTube thing came to be as far as launching your channel and working with the behavior panel.
Okay, first let me talk about that interview you did. You did such a good job of keeping her attention. I know that personality type, and I know how hard that is. And she would just start talking about herself, and you would always laugh, and you'd play up to that ego. You did that so well. I think you've got the wrong gig, man, because I really think you should study interrogation because I think you'd be awesome at it. Because you kept her there without getting on her nerves. That's hard to do, man. It really is, and you did a really good job of it. It was so impressive.
I
And all the
appreciate
guys on
that.
the other guys on the
The
behavior
challenge,
bit.
Scott, and you might know this, is someone that's obsessed with themselves, or someone that she clearly wanted to get points across. And I knew she'd want to keep going back to the religion stuff, but as an interviewer, you've got to keep the thing moving. And so, she could have filibustered the whole time. And maybe if I wasn't tight on time, I would have let her go a little bit more. So it was kind of a balancing act to not offend her. I don't want her to walk out, but
Yeah.
also keep to the points that I want to ask her.
Yeah, man, you did such a good. That's tough to do, and that's why I keep saying it's tough to do because I know how hard that is. But you didn't make her mad because that personality type can flip on you, man, and then it's over, as you know. So that's fairly impressive. I thought you did a great job with that.
Well,
Really good
thank
job
you.
with that.
What was
Yeah.
your? Oh, let's pivot to that interview for a minute. Then, what was your
Okay.
overall take of her behavior and her body language?
That could be the prototypical personality type like that. You have all kind. You have the high end narcissist. Some people think, oh, she's a psychopath. She's not a psychopath. She's just a clinical narcissist with some other things sprinkled in there. That I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, so I can't go in and say she's a this or she's a that. But on the narcissism scale, that's high end right there. You're dealing with somebody who's gone through a lot of emotional and trauma from wherever it's come from, because that's what happens, from when that happens. It could be from that cult thing she was in, or from her husband, or from her parent, who knows? But that's the kind of personality type you get when you're dealing with heavy psychological trauma. That's one of the things that leads to it. Not the same every time, but that's one of them.
Yeah. And for those of you that haven't seen it, you can go to Scott's channel and watch the whole analysis of the interview. And there's some interesting points in there, and interesting too how you're able to see, if she looks away. I'm sure you noticed she kept looking off to the left. Her private investigator was here, but I don't want to say it was a crutch. It was everything, almost every answer. She's looking to the side. What does that tell you?
Well, she wants to engage, but there are two or three things you could look at that and say, here's what's probably happened with this. And you have to say probably or most likely, because when you're dealing with human behavior, it's not the same thing every time. For example, there are no body language cues that tell you somebody's lying every time. There's nothing like that. Or there are no absolutes. So when she's looking over there, she's at the same time, while she has your attention, she has the power to look over there and you can't say anything about it. So she's got you on the hook there. She can be as rude as she wants. She can, like she was being, she didn't really say bye to you either. So that got on my last nerve. I don't think I mentioned that. When she leaves, she really doesn't say anything to you. But What? Oh yeah. So she can look up. She can do whatever she wants in that situation because she's the one in control of that. She doesn't have control of much since she's in prison. She can control how much she eats. If she doesn't, with the amount of food she gives, she can eat all of it or not. She can control if she goes and takes a shower or not. Those are about the only two things she's got that she can control. So she's got you in the room and she's dealing with these other people because she's almost got you captured, in other words, because you're there for a reason. You've got something to do. She knows it and she's doing you a favor from the way she sees it. So you owe her so she can treat you that way. Even though that sounds way out there, that gives you an insight to the way she would treat everyone else in her life, I'm sure. Would be that same way. If I do anything for you at all, just me being there is a gift for you. Me being here, you're lucky to have me here, and I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't have to focus on you because you're not really doing anything for me because I'm doing it all for you. That's the way they usually see that.
I have heard that from people who have been close to her over the past few years, as far as the legal system, that's kind of her behavior. We actually saw some of that during her trial the one day with the Judge Boreski, when she started to interrupt and was rude. And then she turns it on him and says, "Don't raise your voice at me. Don't yell at me." That's the day he ordered her to be taken out of the courtroom, where it flipped so quickly from where she was actually doing all of the behaviors she was accusing him of doing to her.
Oh yeah, that's the key. No matter what I'm doing, I blame you for it. I tell you, you see it in politics all the time. You see it as you know, in the news world all the time. I blame what you're doing is I'm doing, but you're doing that, and that's horrible what you're doing, even though I'm over here doing it. Yeah. So that's just one of those weird little control tactics that people use to take control of a situation, especially when you're dealing with a high-end narcissist like that.
Then on the other end of the spectrum, or maybe not on the other end, but definitely different personality traits, you have Brian Kohberger. Mm-hmm. What have your observations been seeing him in court, especially the sentencing hearing a few weeks ago where he declined to speak? He sat there stone-faced the whole time. What are your thoughts about him?
Well, you're dealing with someone on the autism spectrum, so that's a whole other thing in itself. When you're dealing with autism, I'm semi-versed in that because I've spent a lot of time with people that are autistic, and I understand what we're seeing with him there. And so you could say there's that. That's definitely a part of what we're seeing. At the same time, we're seeing someone who has no empathy, who doesn't feel sorry for anybody, who has no sympathy for anyone. So that, in my opinion, the guy is, if he's not a psychopath, you'd have to know for sure by doing an fMRI of his brain. But boy, he's really close if he's not. So we're seeing two different things there, all coming together as one thing. So that's an odd personality type. I mean, it's the scariest kind because I'm sure those kids in the house were horrified seeing that guy walk around. I wasn't there, we don't have any video or anything, but just knowing that personality type and how they would approach that, how scary that must have been to see that coming at you or to see that unfold, not just having a knife and all that, but the very beginning of it. Because when you jump out and scare somebody at their house or your roommate or something, or your wife or your husband or kids, that's the first thing they're thinking of. That's the horror show they think is going on in their head, is that first few seconds of seeing someone like that, with a mask on, moving slow in the dark, not supposed to be there, it's late. So it's that personality type is obviously they think they're I hate to keep bringing up narcissism because narcissism is overused, but he thinks of himself so highly that he pulled it off perfectly, that he was under the impression everything he was doing was right and perfect. Maybe not morally right, but right for the job he was doing or the project he was doing.
Do you foresee someone with that type of personality doing an interview maybe, or wanting publicity? Lori Daybell likes the cameras. She does her hair. She puts on makeup. We see her. I mean, she agreed to talk to me. Do you see someone like Brian Kohberger doing that? Or is he maybe the type of personality that will go to prison and that's that?
He's pretty much, it looked to me like he was pretty resigned to what was happening. He understands what's happening. Where Lori is more, it's more about look at me, and she's real loud and all that. She's not on the autism spectrum, obviously, but him being usually the people with autism, they're fairly logical. So it's logical for him to see where he is in this situation and accept it and go forward. There's no not much pushback against that or anything. And one of the reasons I think that he didn't say much in court was because it's probably what his lawyers told him. They said, you're a weirdo, man. You say this, and that's it. Just say this one line here, and then sit back, and that's it. He didn't say anything, really. I mean, for the most part, until that one line. Said that, and then moved on. That was it. So he takes the instructions.
And it seemed as if it had been rehearsed, like you said. It said, "I respectfully decline." I think that's what he said. It's like he had been prepared to say it at that time, and he was ready to say it.
Yeah. Not much to say, so he remembered it, and I'm sure it's having that run through his brain the whole time, waiting for that moment when he said it. It's another reason it sounded so odd, because he's trying to say it perfectly the way they told him to say it.
Yeah. So, Scott, I want to ask you, for our people watching, do you have any suggestions or tips on how we can maybe better read people? I mean, I know that's a broad question, but there's a lot of people that might start to date someone, and the people are really idiots, but we don't see it. What are some suggestions or tips that you would give, just overall in general, when we meet somebody, how to make sure they're genuine, or how to not be, sucked into somebody who's a con artist?
Okay, here's some of the main things to look for. When someone, let's go to the wall with this. Let's go to the far end and go, let's say you meet a psychopath. What's going to happen? Because that's the big fear. I'm going to meet a psychopath. The next thing you know. So when you meet a psychopath, what usually happens is this. When you finish meeting that person, you think you've met a kindred spirit. You think you can't believe you've gone your whole life without meeting this person. You can't believe there's a person this much like you that you get along with and like so much, and gosh, they like you that much, and you everything just went so good. You just can't believe it. Now you wait about an hour after that, and if you still feel that way, it may be okay. But after you leave there, you may say to yourself, why do I feel that way? He's a great guy or whatever, but something's not right about that. Most of the time you feel like something isn't right there, and then you'll try to dismiss those things because everything else was so right. But what you're seeing in a psychopath is you're seeing yourself, because what a psychopath does, they just mirror what you're doing. You may talk about sports, man. They'll talk about sports and how it affected their life, and even though they're making it up, and how important it was, and their father played this role in their playing sports, and he was always at the game. It would just go on, and it will be similar to yours. Then you'll notice they'll start talking. If you talk with a lilt, they may add a little bit of lilt to their conversation, the way they're talking to their voice and their vernacular. They'll start using the same types of words you use. Even though we all communicate in a different way, and everybody's unique, there are three styles of communication that everybody falls under. You have visual, then you have auditory, then you have this kinesthetic thing, or the touchy, feely stuff. So if you're talking to a psychopath, quite often what they'll do is, and one way you can help get you to get along with people in a negotiation, let's say, as well, you can use this tactic, is they'll listen to how you talk, and they'll say, if you're looking from a visual perspective, I see what you're saying. That looks good to me. They'll start talking that way too. They'll start talking and referencing things that have to do with vision. They'll tell you how things look to them. They'll talk about maybe art or something, or the way the mountains look, or the sky. Look at the sky. So a lot of things will start revolving around that. If it's auditory, I hear what you're saying. That sounds good to me. It'll be those kind of things. And if it's the kinesthetic, touchy-feely thing, they'll say that her personality is a little bit rough. It's rocky. This didn't start off well because it was whatever. And those things will be what everything is based on. Are those three styles of communication. So you'll listen for that. And if everything tends to be, if they figure out you're a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic person, they'll couch everything in that range. Also, listen to them talk about future plans. They're already planning stuff for you to do. They'll say, well, in the future, we got to go see the art thing at so-and-so. We've got to go fishing, in the whatever spot. And they'll start planning things for the future really quickly. So those are just a few things, but those are some important ones to listen for and watch for.
Right. Tell me what you'll be doing at CrimeCon here in a few weeks in Denver.
Well, half of us can't go. So it's going to be me and Greg Hartley. Chase I can't remember what Chase is doing. Mark's going to be in, I think, London. at the time and can't go. And maybe Chase is doing a training he can't get out of.
So you're talking about the behavior panel. I guess we should, for people
Oh,
that aren't
yeah.
familiar, what is the behavior panel? How did you all come together?
Well, when the behavior panel is three of us are interrogators and one is a body language expert. And during the pandemic, when COVID first started, we were all bored, but we all knew each other and we talked back and forth. And I finally said, look, man, why don't we all just do a video? We'll pick something to talk about. We'll do the Tiger King. That was big back then. We'll talk about the Tiger King. We'll all put up our own channels and then we'll have something. Everybody's like, yeah, we'll do it. So I'll just cut up some videos. We'll talk about each one. We'll go around the room and that'll be it. We got like a whole lot of views on that. So we're like, we should do another one. So we did another one and we did another one. Finally, we named our thing, came up with our own channel, and then started doing videos every Tuesday, every Monday or Tuesday from then on. Sometimes it's Tuesdays, sometimes it's Mondays. So for over 5 years now, that's what we've been doing every week. And we're having the best time doing it because there's nothing. Yeah, nobody, there's nothing in the balance there. Nobody's going to, if you don't get it right, nobody's going to go free. Or nobody's going to go to prison because you got it wrong,
Not under
or those
oath.
things.
Yeah.
So it's
And
fun.
that's the behavior panel, but then you also have your own channel.
Yeah. I call it Behavior X. And I've had a channel for 20 years, probably 15 years or however long YouTube has been up. But I just started really paying attention to it in the past year and a half. Because there's other things that the behavior panel, we do things as a group. We find something we all work and then do. But if you want to do even more than that, you can't get everybody to do those, twice or 3 times a week. And we all want to do a bunch of stuff, but we can't schedule everything. But for those, usually on Mondays or Tuesdays. So I was like, I'll just do them. I'll do my own. Mark does his and Chase does his, and I'm doing mine. Greg doesn't want to do a channel. So
that's great. And that's your channel is where people can find your analysis of the Lori Daybell interview. So you'll be at CrimeCon, and are you tackling, the two of you that are going to be there, a specific case, or can you give us a sneak peek of what your session will be about?
I don't think we know exactly what it's going to be yet. It'll be some famous, crime case, but we'll talk about that. And usually what we've done in the past is we'll go in and we'll show videos. We'll say, okay, here's what we're seeing. And we'll ask people out there, what are you seeing? And we'll let them ask questions. So there's a lot of interaction. We have a lot of people who've been with us from the beginning, and a lot of them go to CrimeCon. So we get to meet a lot of them. So we let people ask questions and talk and say what they think. And it's really interesting. Sometimes people that are in the audience will see something you've missed. And they'll go, well, what about the single shoulder shrug at whatever? And you go, geez, man, I missed that. So you never know. You never know.
It's so true. I have viewers do the same thing. They'll message me about something that I'll go back and watch and think, oh, wow, yeah, I didn't even catch that. So that's great. Scott, I appreciate you chatting with me. Is there anything that you want to add?
Just that I don't mean to be harping on this, but man, you did such a great job with that. All of us on the behavior panel, like, wow, that guy's pretty good. I was like, I know, because you kept her attention. That's so hard, man. I don't know if you appreciate how tough that was. I know you do this stuff all the time, but dude, that was impressive to keep her right there like that without making her mad. Because even though she'd start talking, you'd still get in there and get around that stuff. Because would you have 30 minutes, an hour with her?
We had 30 minutes. I stretched it a little bit to 38, I think, total. But like I said, it was the most challenging interview I've done in 20 years because I knew she was going to play and she came ready to spar. And I could have got caught up on every little thing she said because she said a lot of untruths, a lot of lies. But it did end with her saying, well, maybe you can come back. So she clearly was thinking there was stuff we hadn't touched on. She then got in trouble and lost her iPad or her tablet privileges. So anyway, we're expecting her in Idaho any day now to move back from Arizona. But yeah, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your insight too. It was fun to go back and watch. I guess I'll be honest. I'm glad I didn't know beforehand that you were going to analyze it. Otherwise I would have had that in my head. Like, oh no, what's he going to say? So don't give me a heads up if you do it again.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you if I can use your video because last time I didn't. I was just like, I'm gonna do this and say thanks.
Oh,
It's easier to get forgiveness than permission sometimes.
Right.
But I just couldn't pass it up. It was so good.
Well, thank you. And I'll look forward to meeting you here in a few weeks in Denver.
Yeah, man, we got to connect while we're there for sure.
Let's do it.
I'll give you my number and just text me and we'll connect.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I hope we can see many of you at CrimeCon too. I know a lot of you are going. They've released the schedule. You can go on to CrimeCon's website and click on the classes or the seminars you want to go to. And also, they're still offering that 10% off code if you use my last name, Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, for all of CrimeCon. You can go in and use that off a standard badge. And they've just opened up day passes. If you can't make it for the whole weekend and you're in the Denver area, you can go for Friday or Saturday or Sunday. And hope to see you there. It's going to be a great, great time. I'm just putting together my my panels, my sessions for CrimeCon, just finishing them up, and meeting with Marsha Clark tomorrow to go through our presentation, and then with Colby and Ray Hermosillo, Colby Ryan. So it should be a good time. Hey, I want to talk about newspapers.com. They are our sponsor of Courtroom Insider, and they are going to be at CrimeCon too. It's going to be awesome. They have a whole website, speaking of Kohberger, that you can go on, newspapers.com/Idaho Murders, and that has all of the stuff, newspaper stories, timeline, anything that you might be interested in. Again, it's newspapers.com/Idaho Murders. They have analysis, key facts, timelines, everything like that. And if you don't want to learn anything more about that, but you want to learn about other cases, there's plenty of stuff on there. You can search their archive of over 1 billion pages. Thank you to newspapers.com for sponsoring Courtroom Insider. And thank you for watching Courtroom Insider. It's always great to be with you. We have more programming planned this week. I'm lining up a couple interviews for tomorrow and the next day. Oh, yes, tomorrow. We're going to have back Portia and Brad Bradley. I interviewed these guys, Portia Lauder, last week. She's a convicted felon, owes $11 million in restitution, serves 5 years in federal prison. She was sentenced to 7 for mortgage fraud. She's coming back to answer your questions tomorrow night. So if you have any, please email questions@eastidahonews.com. Brad Bradley, brother of Amy Bradley, who disappeared on the Royal Caribbean cruise back in the 90s, he's coming back too to answer your questions. So we'll accept those up until tomorrow. If you want them to answer your questions, send them in, questions@eastidahonews.com. And then on Thursday, a case that I had not heard about until just recently, when a grandmother emailed me and said she went to visit her grandson in prison, and he confessed, he admitted to killing his father, his little brother, and his father's girlfriend. It is a haunting case. I have all of the evidence photos. I have all of the crime scene photos. They're horrific. I'm not going to show them all to you. I will show you some. That will be Thursday night on Courtroom Insider. And tomorrow night, again, we'll have Portia Lauder and Brad Bradley back here to chat. So thank you very much for watching. Here's where you can find me: Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. You can also find our family channel at youtube.com/@meetintheeatons. We'd love to have you here the next few nights. And we're so glad you're here. Thanks for being here, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow. I'm Nate Eaton. Have a good night.